Order. Simon Bridges.
Mr Speaker, it's good to take a call on electoral law. Of course, electoral law is very, very topical at the moment. And that's because, of course, Labor doesn't seem to know how to follow it, Mr Speaker. They don't seem to know how to follow it. And I won't rush through and go through the history of that in 2005, 2008, and then again most recently. But I put it down to a lack of quality lawyers in Labor Party for a number of years now. A lack of quality lawyers. Of course, there's Charles Chevelle, but Charles Chevelle was an employment law partner, and I've had my doubts about employment law as an area of law for some time now. But in any event, that got them going, didn't it? In any event, it's good to speak on this, the Electoral Administration Amendment Bill number 2. No, she's a Bush lawyer. It's good to speak on this bill that transfers the functions of the Chief Registrar of Electors to the new Electoral Commission and makes other changes. Well, I'd like to speak at length about this bill, but it makes other changes to the administration of electoral enrolment as well. It's a technical administrative bill. I see Stuart Nash on the other side. He, of course, is probably single-handedly responsible for what Labor got wrong with their ads recently, but I haven't got time for those sort of comments. I commend this bill to the House.
Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise to the Electoral Administration Amendment Bill number 2. This is the second reading of this bill. It was introduced in November 2010 and referred on the 23rd of November to the Justice and Electoral Select Committee, of which I am now a member, although I was not at that time. Before I talk a little more about why Labor supports this bill, I will note that I have to say something in response to the comments of the member opposite who just spoke. Now, I do find it absolutely rich coming from that side of the House that Mr Simon Bridges thinks that it's okay to talk about corruption in politics. Coming from the party that is as corrupt as any we've ever seen.
Order. To use the word that the members used brings the House into disorder, and I'll ask the member to withdraw that comment and not to use it again on either side, even in interjections or in made speeches. Carol Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I withdraw that word and just go on to talk about the fact that on the other side of the House we still have members of Parliament who were part of the regime under the Hollow Men. And I'll leave it at that and go back to the Electoral Administration Amendment Bill number 2. Now, this bill implements, as my colleague Charles Chevelle said, stage 2 of a two-stage reform of electoral administration, establishing a new electoral commission and making other changes. Now, I thought it would be just useful to look at a little bit about this electoral commission and what's proposed there. This bill will complete the set-up of the Electoral Commission, and in doing so, what that will mean is it follows the first piece, which was passed in May 2010, which established a new independent Crown entity to be known as the Electoral Commission. Now, the Electoral Commission's functions are to conduct elections, deal with donations to and expenditure of political parties and candidates, inform the public about electoral matters, which is very important, apportion broadcasting time and funding, register parties and logos, and maintain the electoral roll. And in doing that, effectively, what has happened is that the functions of the 3 former electoral administration bodies, that's the Chief Electoral Officer, the Electoral Commission, the previous one, and the Chief Registrar of Electors, who had various of those responsibilities, are now consolidated into one body, the new Electoral Commission, and this will undoubtedly streamline and improve the process, which is not to comment negatively on any of the three previous organisations, because I do think that one of the things that we can agree on in this House and we can take some confidence from is that as a country we are very concerned about ensuring that we have transparency around electoral processes, that we want those to be robust, that we want our electoral system to operate in a way that is not, as in other countries in the world, subject to intimidation, subject to people buying votes, subject to corruption among electoral officials. Fortunately, in this country that is not the case, although there is always room for improvement, and hence this bill does establish that new electoral commission to take on the consolidated functions of the three previous bodies. So that makes a great deal of sense, and certainly we are very supportive of it. And I would go as far as saying that Labor is also appreciative of the consultative process which the government has taken in its relation to changes in electoral administration. So, as I say, the new Electoral Commission will be a more effective regulator of the elections, providing greater integration, efficiency and a more strategic approach. That's what's envisaged. So this bill was scrutinised by, as I said, the Justice and Electoral Select Committee. There was actually only 4 submissions made on this bill, and we heard 2 of those submissions, and we received advice from the Ministry of Justice, and of course it's always important to acknowledge the contribution that those officials make to the process. In addition to doing phase 2 of the new Electoral Commission, some of the other amendments that are included in this are around, as again Mr Chevelle said, around online enrolment of electors. That's it. Online re-enrolment and updating. So what that will do is give voters the option of re-enrolling and communicating changes to their enrolment details via the internet or by using an approved electronic medium. Now this will use the iGov log-on service, which has been developed by the Department of Internal Affairs. Now it is in fact stage 1 of a 2-stage process, and I think this is really important. As with any significant changes in the process of enrolling and using electronic mediums, it is important that we get this right. So this is stage 1 of a 2-stage process which will eventually give electors the option of full online enrolment. Now that will require, as we've been advised, a higher level of security than is currently possible, so that work will continue to go on. The Department of Internal Affairs is working on that, and the 2-stage process is seen as necessary to ensure the integrity of the electoral roll is maintained. Now that's absolutely fundamental to our system. Having confidence in the electoral roll is really important. That is the key by which people get their opportunity to vote and to have their vote counted. And we all know that there can be problems. We've seen, I know in my own experience, there's been problems around people whose names are in a slightly different order than what people in New Zealand have generally been used to, and that has caused problems in how people enrol, and then when they go to vote, trying to find themselves on the electoral roll with the staff at the polling places. But also, of course, we have a problem in this country where every election, and we haven't nailed this problem yet, every election there are people who in good faith go along to vote. And these people cast a vote, in fact. They cast a special vote because they can't be found on the electoral roll, and there's a reason for that, and that's that they haven't enrolled. But they can't be found. The officials at the polling place will let them fill in a statutory declaration, do a special vote, and they vote, thinking that they have contributed to the outcome of the election, and sadly, of course, they have not. And so we do need to work on how we can improve the feedback loop there, how we can find those people, and I have spoken to many people who have assured me that they have voted year after year, and in fact they're not on the electoral roll. So that's an area of improvement, but my point really is that integrity of the electoral roll is very important. It is the fundamental process by which you get your voting paper and you get to cast your vote, which of course everybody in this House, I'm sure, is solidly a promoter of. I'm sure that every MP here works very hard to support those people who try and make sure that every New Zealander who is eligible is on the electoral roll so that they can cast a vote that counts, because that is the basic nature of our democracy, and we all need to take greater responsibility to ensure that people are on the roll, because they're legally required to be, but more importantly it's the essential step that they get to cast their vote and for that vote to count. But secondly, we should all be taking responsibility to encourage our fellow citizens to go out and vote, and that is of course very topical right now as we lead into an election in less than 5 months' time. So I would urge all members across the House to take that responsibility seriously, and I'm sure even Ms Gowdy takes that responsibility seriously. So that is another part of this process in this bill. They are the two probably key changes that are being looked at here. There are also some provisions around immigration processes, and I'm sure others will want to talk about those provisions. Some of the changes, and in fact those immigration changes, arose as a result of the inquiry into the conduct of the 2008 general election. And again, I think it's a strength of our system that we do an inquiry after each general election, and we do an inquiry after each local government election to try and see if we can improve the processes. That's in our best interest, and arguably those sort of things are where we see this House operating at its best, because in a cross-party manner we are talking to New Zealanders, we are talking to the relevant officials to find out how things went in those elections and what could be done better. So on that positive note, I commend this bill.
Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.